Edition on Times Radio.
This land is your land, this land is my land, from California to the New York Islands, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me.
Welcome back. It's time for our Trump dump, and this evening we're joined by Harriet Alexander from New York. Hello to you, Harriet.
Hello, hi.
Hello. Well, now then, Donald Trump has been doubling down on his recent criticism of Vladimir Putin, saying that the Russian president is playing with fire. Harriet, we've been watching the comings and goings of Donald Trump and his various statements about Putin. But in a post on Truth Social, he's now said, what Vladimir Putin doesn't realise is that if it weren't for me, lots of really bad things would have already happened to Russia. And I mean really bad. And that's in capitals. And yesterday, President Trump expressed his displeasure.
I'll give you an update. I'm not happy with what Putin's doing. He's killing a lot of people, and I don't know what the hell happened to Putin. I've known him a long time, always gotten along with him, but he's sending rockets into cities and killing people, and I don't like it at all, okay? We're in the middle of talking, and he's shooting rockets into Kiev and other cities. I don't like it at all. I don't like what Putin is doing, not even a little bit. He's killing people. And something happened to this guy, and I don't like it.
Harriet Alexander, listening to that. Somebody said to me yesterday, what is it about an illegal invasion of a sovereign neighbour that Donald Trump seems to struggle to condemn? It seems to have taken him a long time to realise that bad things are happening.
It does, yeah. And it also seems to have taken him quite a long time to realise that Vladimir Putin perhaps was not being entirely sincere in wanting to reach a peace deal with Ukraine. Trump has been very much in favour of offering the carrots, I suppose, of saying to Russia, you can have a great trade deal and we can all be friends and this is going to be in your benefit. But up until now, he's really not shown any sign of wanting to use the stick. He likes, as we just heard, emphasizing how much he knows Vladimir Putin, how they have this long history. He talks about that all the time. But you wonder now whether this is just the sign that perhaps Trump is going to actually do something about Putin really ignoring all of these requests for talks, or whether this is just yet more smoke and mirrors, and whether it is indeed an excuse for Trump to walk away from the whole thing, which many members of his inner circle would actually quite like.
Well, indeed. And now the Kremlin claimed that Donald Trump was showing signs of emotional overload after calling Vladimir Putin absolutely crazy. That was after Moscow's largest aerial assault on Ukraine. But it does seem as if it's taken Donald Trump a little while to even question whether Putin might be playing him. And Putin, at the same time, seems completely unbothered. He seems to know how to handle Donald Trump, a bit of flattery and play to his vanity.
Right. I mean, this is sort of the ex-KGB man, isn't it? Who's really got the measure of Trump, I think. And yes, I mean, the key question is whether this is going to push the US to walk away from Ukraine. Of course, that's exactly what Russia wants. Trump had that 2-hour conversation with Putin last week, and he came away, Trump did, saying that he felt that there was real progress made. But of course, there's very little sign of that so far. The Kremlin would only say that they thought that there was perhaps the possibility of beginning some sort of discussion. It was much more vague from their side. So, the question remains, how long is the US going to stick at this? J.D. Vance in particular has said they're ready to walk away. Marco Rubio has said the same. Of course, if the US does, that would be devastating for Ukraine, and that's exactly what Putin wants.
Absolutely. And of course, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky Zelensky has been calling for more action and not words. He's had a harsh series of words from Donald Trump as well. But nevertheless, you're absolutely right. What happens next? Peace talks seem to have faltered. There doesn't seem to be much hope of a breakthrough. I suppose you've got the minerals deal in Ukraine that's been signed, but what else is there by way of some sort of help for Zelensky?
Right, and Trump has noticeably not wanted to go down the route of increasing sanctions on Russia. It was quite telling, actually, that when he did his Liberation Day tariffs back in April, Russia wasn't even on that list of countries that were going to have tariffs put on their products. And, you know, so far, Putin seems to be getting away with it. Trump seems to want very little to do with it. I mean, he says that he wants to stop the killing. We just heard in that clip that he says that that is his aim, that he is adamant that he needs to stop the bloodshed. And he, of course, wants to see a big trading sort of relationship form with Russia. That for him would be a real achievement. But so far, he doesn't want to put any sanctions, any additional penalties on Russia. So it's hard to see where we go from here. We're just going round and round in circles.
Well, Harriet, you mentioned trade. Let's move on to another topic because earlier this month, Sir Keir Starmer here was hailing the trade deal that had been struck between the UK and the US as fantastic and historic. But the International Monetary Fund has been warning that US tariffs are still set to drag down the UK economic growth next year, knocking 0.3% off the size of the UK economy by next year, and said that trade tensions would likely dent UK output because of persistent uncertainty in UK trade. I guess we're not the only country here in the UK that is affected by those tariff threats. But what are the perceptions in the US? What are people there saying about the tariffs, and if they think that they're seeing allies like the UK suffer?
Well, I think, to be fair, most Americans are not particularly concerned, with all due respect, about the UK suffering. They're looking very much at their own pocketbooks, at their own position. And of course, the IMF said earlier in April, they warned that the US was going to suffer a similar fate. They said that they slashed their US forecast from 2.8% growth down to 1.8% growth. So the IMF is saying these tariffs are going to hurt everybody. And some senior economists working at places like JP Morgan have already downgraded their forecast for the US and said that it is likely that there may be a recession by the end of the year. So people are really worried about that. But I think in more practical terms, it's the cost of living. It's the fact that your iPhone, which Trump keeps on coming back to, that if Trump gets his way and puts tariffs on that, it could be up to $3,500 for an iPhone. So people are concerned about what it's going to mean for their consumer goods and what it's going to mean in the long term as well.
Yeah, he threatened big tariffs on China, and that has gone away temporarily. He also threatened big tariffs on the European Union, and that has now been held off for more than a month. Do you think this is a sign that maybe inside the White House, Donald Trump himself realizes that the tariff policy is failing?
I think it's perhaps a realization that this is maybe not wise. It's not wise for the US economy. Of course, he has hardliners around him still, people like Peter Navarro, who's really hawkish, particularly on China. He's still there. But he also has in his ear people like Scott Bessent, who's the Treasury Secretary, who's much more moderate and is quite widely respected within the business community. He's the one who's playing a big role in negotiating these trade deals. And they are trying to sort of chart a much more moderate course, for sure. I mean, Trump has been spooked by the bond markets, which, you know, people never really paid that much attention to. But when they start reacting, that's when Trump realized that this was perhaps going too far. And he's trying at the moment to get his big, beautiful bill through Congress. This is a really, really broad bill, which looks looks at all sorts of issues, tax cuts for some of the very wealthy and cuts to Medicaid and so on. But people are alarmed about the US national debt. And if you are hammering tariffs as well, that's going to make things even more unstable. So it's quite a complicated picture for the US economy.
And what's happening with the relationship between Donald Trump and Harvard? Because the Trump administration's told US embassies and consular sections to stop scheduling interviews for foreign students applying to study in the US. Speaking yesterday from the White House, the president reinforced his position.
Billions of dollars has been paid to Harvard. How ridiculous is that? Billions. And they have $52 billion as an endowment. They have $52 billion. And this country is paying billions and billions of dollars and then gives student loans and they have to pay back the loans. So Harvard's going to have to change its ways.
He's been constantly criticising Harvard, hasn't he? One of America's oldest and most prestigious universities, saying the institution needs to provide the government with foreign student lists. What's happening with this then? Are universities getting together to try and stop this move? Is there a way of stopping it apart from going to the courts?
Well, he's really going for Harvard because Harvard is the one that's really standing up to him. Initially, he lent on a variety of universities, Columbia and others, and asked them to comply, doing things like getting rid of their diversity, equity, and inclusion, and doing things like having a ban on face masks on campus, and they went along with it. But Harvard is the one that's really stuck its neck out and said, no, we're not going to do what you want. For instance, the Trump administration wanted a list of all of the foreign students that were at the university, and Harvard has said, no, we're not going to give you their disciplinary records. And they believe that Trump is attacking their freedom of speech. Harvard is taking the Trump administration to court because they don't want to have to comply with, for instance, allowing the government to vet their departments. They say that this is against really fundamental US principles. The latest is that the Trump administration today has said that they are going to cut $100 million in federal funding for Harvard. This, of course, comes on top of the cuts of almost $3 billion in federal aid that was previously allocated to Harvard. The Trump administration says that this is because there's race discrimination, there's anti-Semitism prevalent on campus, but it's really become a war of attrition. And the president of Harvard, Alan Gerber, he really wants to fight this. He is taking a stand. He's saying we're not going to bow down. And actually, he's being supported by quite a lot of academics around the country.
And there's a report in the Times today saying that Germany's offered to host an exile campus of Harvard University. Could you see more of this across Europe?
Well, it really is a gift to other universities outside of the United States. I mean, the top universities in America are undoubtedly some of the best in the world. And the thing that I think is upsetting a lot of people is that the academic research that they produce is so valuable in a whole variety of fields. And we're already seeing the impact on that. You know, people who are studying childhood cancers, people who are studying radiation in space, they've been told that their funding is being cut. People who are taking part in trials of groundbreaking drugs have been told that those programs are ending. So, you know, these financial threats are very real, and it's actually not that easy to take the endowment that Harvard has, which is enormous. I mean, it's bigger than many countries, $53 billion. That's more than the GDP of places like Tunisia. But it's not possible for them to take that money and just switch it because it's often given very specific allocations. So it's a battle and it's going to continue.
It will continue. Harriet Alexander in New York, thank you for bringing us tonight's Trump Dump. Now, it's the evening edition here. I'm Carolyn Quinn sitting in for Kate Borsay. We will be taking